Hello and welcome everybody. I'm Jean Carragher, President of Capstone Marketing, and I can't tell you how excited I am about this program today. It is 45 years since the Bates case versus Arizona enabled professional services firms to market their services. And it was 33 years ago that AIM was formed. And at the recent conference, AIM named its 30th Marketer of the Year, all milestones in our profession. And this got me thinking about the evolution of accounting marketing and what that means to firms and marketers now and going into the future. So I'm thrilled with the panel that we've assembled today. I'd like to introduce them. Adrian Ornick, wave. Adrian is the global growth leader. And Adrian, tell me the specific division.
Global Delivery Services.
Global Delivery Services at EY. And Adrian was the 1993 Marketer of the Year, right? Welcome, Adrian. Next is our friend, Sally Glick. Sally is the Principal and Chief Growth Strategist at Sobel & Co. And Sally was the AIM Marketer of the Year in 2003. Give a round of applause to Sally. Great job. Next up, okay, we've got our pal, Eric Majchrzak, who is the Chief Executive Officer at BeachFleischman. And Eric was the Marketer of the Year in 2015. Eric?
Hey, everybody.
All right, and our fourth panelist is Sarah Cirelli, who is the Chief Marketing Officer at Grassi. And Sarah was the Marketer of the Year in 2021. So we have 4 decades represented here of Marketers of the Year. And this doesn't happen very often. As a matter of fact, this might be the first time that we've assembled a panel like this. So guys, I really appreciate you making the time for us. And again, I'm so excited about the conversation we're about to have. Now, of course, I have planned questions for the panelists, but for those of you in the room with us, would love for you to work the chat box and put your questions there. I will carefully watch the clock and we will end exactly at 2:15 Eastern, but we've got a lot to cover from then. So again, don't hesitate to use the chat to either ask a new question or add your experience or situation, whatever that might be. So let's get started right from the top. So I'm going to ask, we'll go in chronological order for this first one. So my opening question is, how did you survive your first year in accounting marketing? Adrian.
Ignorance is bliss. And by that, I mean, you don't really know much your first year, particularly back then when there were no predecessors, right? Or very few predecessors in accounting marketing. We were sort of blazing the trail back then. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword. You didn't know much, but then again, neither did your stakeholders. So anything that you said to your partner or your managers, or frankly, the practice or the business as a whole, seemed like rocket science to many of them. So in a way, it was difficult, but in a way, it was also quite easy.
Right. Awesome. Sally.
So I was kind of lucky. My first experiences, I worked with my own father. He was a sole practitioner. So I sort of had him in the right place, Adrian. He was thinking I was brilliant, whatever I did. But whatever I did was so different than anything he had ever done before that he wasn't always sure what to do with me, except that he had kind of given me a free hand and said, I have time to serve more clients, but no time to find them. Go figure that out. And so it was about building relationships and connecting in the community. And he allowed me the freedom to do that. But again, he had no clue how to measure the success, because it certainly wasn't going to be. I went out to a program and came back with 2 tax returns and an audit. So the fact that there wasn't always a correlation between my initiatives and our any kind of tangible result always threw him, because he was looking for that tangible result. But he stuck with me. My mother wouldn't let him fire me anyway.
All right, Eric, how did you survive your first year?
Boy, my first year was the same year Sally won Marketer of the Year. So it was 2003. And no question about it, I had a coworker, a buddy in the marketing department at the firm I started in, which was Fried Majchrzak in Buffalo, New York. And Mac had already been there for 6 or 7 years. He helped me navigate the personalities of the partners. He told me where the landmines were. And he was a good confidant and a good counselor. And I could have not done it without him. There's no question about it. And we had a lot of fun along the way. So he's what got me through my first year for sure.
Awesome. Sarah.
Yeah, I feel like my answer is very similar to Adrian's. I don't know about any of the other panelists, and I always kind of joke about this, but when I was a tiny Sarah Cirelli playing with my dolls, I never really acted out my hopes and dreams of becoming an accounting marketer. It's just not what I saw. So I think when I was in that first year, I saw it as something to get me to whatever the next thing was. So it really was an ignorance is bliss. I didn't know what I didn't know at that point. But all jokes aside, I feel like that was probably the easiest year to survive out of all of them. I did believe it was just a stop on the way to somewhere else. And I don't want to say that it gets harder and harder every year, but it gets more and more meaningful as I learn more and as I get excited about more and I see more opportunity. And I think that as things get more meaningful to me, they just take up more mental space. So it might feel harder. And like Eric said, it was absolutely critical to find my internal allies. And I had one in particular, Sally, I know you remember Andy Vitale, you're right, the partner in charge of the office that I was in at Witham when I started in 2007. And I don't even really think I understood the impact of the time that he spent on me until I grew in my career and I realized how many other things he probably had to do rather than spending time with me. But it was, any amount of time that he spent with me and anything he did with me, he treated as if it was the most important thing that he would do that day. And even though it was just going over like a menu for a holiday party or something that I, as an intern, and so sticking close to internal allies and learning the ropes, like Eric mentioned, all of those things added up, I realized helped me survive that first year and ultimately my entire career up until this point. I don't think those are lessons that I have ever forgotten. I carry them with me.
So Sarah, let me stick with you for a second because have you had a moment yet where you realized that you had a career in accounting marketing as opposed to having a job in accounting marketing?
I do. I actually, and that's a good kind of segue from what I mentioned earlier, but I got a lot of fame earlier on for those Witham Flash Mob and State of the Firm videos. And at the time I was 20 something and really enjoyed it because dancing accountants on Broadway in New York City to Party Rock Anthem. How do you not love that? But I do also, Jean, remember the moment where I was able to connect the dots between the fun we were having to the actual impact it was having on the success and the growth of Witham at the time. And that's something that took me a few years to learn, and then learning how to connect those dots before you do something that's fun. And once and I'm still working on that. So I don't know that that's ever something that we all master. I think a lot of it is trial and error and trying and failing and learning and adjusting. But I do remember the moment where I was able to connect the fun that we were having to the impact that it was having on the growth of the firm. And I said, there's something here, right? This thing that I thought was not what I wanted to do could be something that I love, if finding a way to have fun and the skills that you have and marrying it with impact. If you can figure out that combination of elements, oh my God, there's no better recipe for a successful career, I feel.
Right. And Eric, clearly you found that career path. Was there a moment when you realized that had happened?
For sure. And I've told people this over the years. It was my first AIM conference. I had no idea this could be a career until I went to my first AIM conference and I saw all the excitement and the camaraderie. And I just had no clue. I was an accidental accounting firm marketer. I had no intentions of staying at the firm I was at for more than, maybe half a year or a year at most. And then you just see all the opportunity. I would say also when I came in, it was about 20 years ago. So it was 2003-ish. This was early internet. This is pre-social media. And we figured out a way, even 20 years ago, to harness the power of that and bring work into the firm using a different means, instead of going out into the community or going to Rotary, all of a sudden here was this thing called Google, which nobody, partners back then didn't know what Google was. And we found the ability to leverage that. And I knew that was going to be a game changer. I also knew, because of the way that those opportunities were coming in through the firm website back then, that I knew 20 years ago that this profession was not going to be served long as a time-based business model. Because what would take years for accountants, to build up this credibility in the community, all of a sudden was taking days or weeks for these leads to come in, and it just shortened the sales cycle like that. And I knew from that point on that this was going to be quite a ride, and that we were going to ride this technology wave, and that's exactly what happened.
Right. That is a great example. Sally. Oh.
I always thought that I did a good job, and I use the word job in my own head. I like what I do it well, and I'm good at my job. But when the Vidir Group here in New Jersey came to me while I was the vice president of marketing at what is now Lineal Global, but was Polaris maybe at that time, Gene. I followed Brian and Gene in that role. And he said, we need you to move to New Jersey. We can't move forward without you. I was stunned. I thought he was a little crazy, but I did actually make that move because I thought, what a wonderful challenge, what a great opportunity to build a career. And the first thing they said when I came to New Jersey was, you're on the partner track. I didn't even express a desire. I thought people that were partners at CPA firms, crazy me, were CPAs. And it never occurred to me that I would have been so influential and so essential that I would have a seat at the partner table, making important directions, giving directions and making decisions. So that was just like a turning point. And it's what moved me from Atlanta, where it's warm after living in Chicago, to New Jersey, where it's cold again. But it was a wonderful move, and it made a difference in my whole entire life.
Right. That's awesome. Adrian, any different thoughts?
Yeah, for me, Gene, I think there were two inflection points. The first one was, and that was back in the day when you actually had newspapers to read. Every article I read back in the day said professional services is where the future will be, and that we're going to become a services economy. We, meaning the U.S., was going to become a services economy. And there I was I was VP sales and marketing in a hard, manufacturing, heavy industry area. And so I reached out to our accounting firm, who happened to have at that point in time executive search arms within accounting firms. We had headhunting businesses back in the day. And just by sheer chance, the headhunter that I bought lunch with and said, hey, I'm a young guy, here's what I've been doing, any thoughts for me going forward? He offered me a job at Deloitte as their very first in Chicago, as their very first marketing and business development director. And that's where I cut my teeth in the industry. So that was the first inflection point that said, hey, there's a business here, there's an industry here that I really wasn't familiar with or aware of, but it seems like there is a real opportunity because I'd be the first, I'd be plowing, new territory in the organization. The second
Adrian, I never knew that.
Yeah.
Because, my experience and friendship with you has always started, when you were at Price Waterhouse. So that's, or Coopers and Lybrand, I should say.
Oh no, yeah. I've spun through all of them. So because the second inflection point is when I actually got a call from a headhunter looking for a role at Arthur Andersen in their global marketing group. And so that was the sort of second inflection point that said, hey, this is a serious industry, and there is an opportunity for someone like myself to actually have a long-term career here, that I'm no longer looking for opportunities, but the opportunity has actually reached out to me. And then from there, it grew. I'd like to say, I won't say how many years, you can do the math, but I've been in this industry for a very, very long time. And I think I've been quite successful as a result of it, and had a very good career.
Absolutely. Agree with you completely. So do you think it's fair to say that getting into the accounting marketing profession is no longer, I couldn't find a job anyplace else and there was this firm and I can get a job there for a while, to accounting marketers can enter this profession and build a long-term career in it?
Absolutely. I mean, it's a profession it was serendipitous for myself and many others that fell into this industry early on. But from my perspective now, it is a hard and fast career choice that you can make. And again, I will say that it has been an incredible career ride for me personally. And I think it will continue to be. When I look at where firms started, even the Big Four, which has been where my history has been, from very, infant, from the very beginning, and it was very infantile in nature, to where we are today in terms of the level of sophistication as to how we go to market and how we drive business. The professionals that we hire now in our business are first-rate marketer and business development people that you would want to have in any organization anywhere. And you didn't have that back early, as I said, early on in the day. It was very much a trial and error situation. Right.
Yeah. Do you know what? All of us can be really proud about this, right? Everybody, in this room or out of this Zoom room, that's contributed to this profession. We should all be very proud of the point where we are right now with accounting marketing. So kudos to everybody. Kudos to everybody. Okay, so I want to spend a little bit of time. So think about the year that you were named Marketer of the Year. What was the biggest challenge that you had to face, and how did you handle it? So I'm going to go out of order here a little bit. So Eric, I'm going to start with you. So your year was 2015, correct? Yeah, 2015. What was your challenge?
I think that was the year. I was already a shareholder, but prior to that, I was still very much in the traditional, I'll say, CMO role. But in 2015, that's when I really stepped out of my comfort zone to be more of an executive leader and expanding my influence and my knowledge across the firm beyond just marketing. So I remember challenging the business model to the senior partners, saying, we can't sustain ourselves if we are, billing by the hour. I remember challenging that, and then, going on this journey to advance pricing. So that was one of the things. I inserted myself into the M&A process and got on the M&A committee and eventually chaired that committee. And so that was the committee that determined what firms we were going to merge with or acquire, or what new joint ventures we were going to launch. I started also developing new service lines and starting new service lines. These were all things I had no idea how to do. But I don't think you don't necessarily have to have the answers to everything. You just kind of jump right in and you get your feet wet. You talk to the people who have done it. Some of them are on this call. And that's how you build your career. You're building a network of people who are supporting you and giving you counsel and advice. And that's how I dealt with it. I had to go outside the firm and talk to people. And sometimes it meant talking to people outside of the profession, even just to get a handle on how to do these things. And so I think that was my first big challenge in that 2015 year when I won Marketer of the Year. And it was almost like, okay, I've done this part, the marketing part, but it's time for me to expand my horizon and try different things.
Eric, I've heard you talk many times about and encouraging marketers to step up into leadership positions, because what firm wouldn't want someone with these leadership capabilities, right? And the motivation, and the instinct, if you will, to get themselves into those spots.
Right. And we're tailor-made for that type of movement because we are advocates for the client. And we're that voice in the room that advocates for the client. And so that's a different mindset. You're flipping it on its head when you're doing that. So that's where I think it can start for folks on this call, is to always be the advocate for the client. And then to really broaden your definition of what marketing is to, I mean, we've all learned in college, if we, got a marketing degree, there's 4 P's to the marketing mix. Traditionally, although today they say for professional services, there are 7 P's. And it's really, you have to understand pricing. You have to understand product and service development. You have to understand place or distribution channels. And that's how you expand your responsibilities in the firm. That's how you gain new leadership skills, is by going into these other areas that traditional marketing departments and accounting firms don't necessarily get into that area. In fact, they kind of cede that stuff to the accountants and say, well, they're going to handle pricing, they're going to handle new products, they're going to handle distribution channels. And I think that's our job and our responsibility.
Right. Great point. Great point. Okay. So Sally, it was 2003. What was your challenge?
So that was the year that I moved to New Jersey to accept the job at the Vidier Group. And they were so excited that I was there. They couldn't wait to nominate me, which was very lovely, except I really had not totally gotten my feet wet. And to everyone's point here, you cannot do a good job if you don't have the lay of the land. You need to know the players. You need to know the culture. You need to know their appetite for marketing and an expanded role of marketing. You need to know that what the community is like and the various business owners to really able to help them craft the right messages, right? So I was trying to move as fast as I could to get to know as many people as I could. Fortunately, that played well for me. And I have a network that I'm really proud of and that I have built here in New Jersey over a period of time that people who live here all their lives have not had the chance to do. But I had no choice. When someone said, hit the ground running, they weren't kidding. So that was my challenge. And I will just tell you a brief story. I was walking around with the managing partner, meeting at CEO, meeting all the new players who I didn't know yet, and stopped at the doorway of one of the partners. And I said, hi, John, I'm here to really help you out. And he looked at me and he said, I don't market. But I'd been told about him in advance. He was a curmudgeon and he loved golf and he was a golfer in college as well. And I said, but you golf, right? He's like, yeah. And I named a couple of law firms that probably Sarah knows really well, McCarter and English being one of them here. And I said, wouldn't you golf with those guys? He's like, yeah. I'm like, you could be the marketing chair one of these days if you keep that up. And I just blew him out of the water. Later, he declared himself poster child because he was my favorite, because he grasped everything and felt I transformed his life. But I had to take a while to talk, not listen, to listen, not talk, and then talk, but to hear what they were saying and needed and would be comfortable embracing before I came running in with all the enthusiasm and excitement that Dave Telesnik wanted me to bring to the table, but he was kind of out there leading the pack and everybody was behind him by about, 50 yards. So I had to wait for them to catch up with me. And it was a challenge a bit.
Yeah. Persistence, I think, is a quality that everybody on this call has.
Yes.
Whether we realize we had it or not, right? It's
Patience and persistence. Absolutely.
Oh my gosh. So another key word. So if we go to Sarah, Sarah, I think we all know the answer to your challenge.
Yeah. You'll
of the
never
year.
guess.
I think it's pandemic.
Yeah. Yeah. That was a layup for me. Crazy time. But yeah, you know what's funny? And I feel like I can say this to you guys because we're among friends, but there was that level of energy, which I kind of miss. You can't sustain that crazy. There was like a spirit in Grassi where everybody came together and was working hard, and it was weirdly fun. I won't admit that I said that, but yeah, that was the year that we were in that time where it felt almost as if like all of the playing fields were leveled, right? So, any strategies or plans you have were wiped clean, and you had a really clean whiteboard on what are you going to do, and there's something about that was exciting. And we did an okay job at it, right? So we pulled together a really nice strategy and process for bringing new services to market very quickly, very effectively, making the most of what we had, creating some kind of internal machines and factories, we called them. And that process of bringing new services to market quickly and effectively, we have only evolved since then, and we're continuing to refine those. And what was really pretty exciting too is we made the decision to make some pretty significant investments in our technology when the pandemic hit. And that is fairly unique. You know, I do think there were many firms across the country, across the world, really, who decided to pause any plans for making investments in technology. And what's exciting is I think those firms who did make those investments are pretty poised to pull ahead now. And over the next several months, hopefully, you know, we're starting to see even some renewed success in the new website, some other digital strategies that we were able to pull together, and some other platforms that we invested in. But it was that time where we had to figure out, you know, how are we going to continue to grow the firm, not just through M&A, but organically? How are we going to do that while doing our very best to keep our businesses and, you know, our clients in business themselves? And how are we going to change the way that we communicate? How are we going to change the way that we deliver service? How are we going to change the way that we're generating new business and seeing them through the sales cycle? And how are we going to do that? Plus, you guys know, you know, figure out how to live your life all over again. You know, everything looks different, and we're all sitting in different rooms, and we can't look at each other. And what are we going to do? And I do believe that Grassi did a great job coming together and figuring that out. And I give our marketing team some pretty well-deserved kudos. And that's kind of what I mean by that excitement. You know, you can't sustain that level of you can't. And I do understand that, and I'm thankful. But whatever that is, that type of environment that, I don't even want to call it fear-based, but there's a little bit of fear involved, right? You know, how do we figure this out? We have to. If we don't, what's going to happen? And you see that level of energy, which is pretty. It's really very interesting. And I don't want to say the R word this soon into and bring the vibe down a little bit, but you know, we're talking about the recession, right? We're talking about a potential recession and what types of opportunities are there, and we're constantly trying to foster an environment where we're thinking that way, so it feels less scary, and so we feel like we're in control, right, of the outcome. And whether it's firms consolidating or private equity coming in or the recession or a pandemic, you know, how are we consistently spotting the opportunity in those types of situations before they're in our lap, and hopefully we're able to kind of, you know, recycle that type of effort in the future with whatever the heck it is. You know, it's always going to be something.
Right. So what I'm hearing, and not only from Sarah, but the importance of marketers having those conversations with your firm's leadership, not only what is happening within the firm and opportunities, but what's happening in the country, you know, what's happening in the world, and how does that impact the firm and its people, and in turn, your clients, that you know, whether you have the seat at the table, you know, or it's so important to be having those conversations and to be proactive and placing yourself to be able to have those conversations, right? And Eric would tell you, don't ask permission, right, to ask those questions, right? You've got to dive in and do it, right?
Bring your own seat.
There you go. There you go. Okay, first one of the day. Bring your own seat. So Adrian, in 1993, the world looked a lot different than it did in 2021.
No question about it.
Add about the challenge you were facing then?
Yeah, I mean, if you know, being honest and transparent, I think life was quite honestly a lot simpler back in 1993. I can even say that. It sometimes is difficult to say that. 1993. So we didn't have all of these issues that, you know, we're dealing with today, like the economy and like the pandemic and so on and so forth. So for me, if I had to think about it, it was really boiled down to respect, and respect for the profession was probably the biggest hurdle that needed to be overcome. It was so new back then that most of the practice, most of the industry really didn't know what to do with people like ourselves who really wanted to try to make a difference for the practice, for the profession itself. And gaining that respect was a big part of establishing yourself, gaining the credentials that you needed in order to not only survive back then, but to be able to thrive in the profession. And let's face it, I mean, we all have, you know, I like to say that probably outside of law firms, the accounting and consulting industry probably collects the lion's share of people that have a very, very strong sense of self. And, you know, with that, you have to really figure out how to navigate within that environment and gain that level of respect for not only the role that you do, but also for yourself as an individual. And you do that by leading the horse to water, but showing them how they need to drink from from the well itself or from the river itself. So.
Not only did you wear a collared shirt, but you just explained that in a very polite way.
A strong sense of self. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. I could think of a couple of other words that would describe that, but we don't have to do that right now.
Yeah.
Okay, so this next question might be a little difficult for everybody because it's just a little scenario, but let's see, if we could get a couple of responses of it, just, based upon the year. So like Marty McFly in Back to the Future, you've been thrown back in time. What tool or strategy or technology would you miss the most? So Sally, let's try this little game with you. So it's not 2003, it's 1993. So what tool or strategy did you use in 2003 that didn't exist that you would miss if it were 1993?
What tool am I using now that I wish I had then?
Well, yeah, a tool that you had in 2003 when you were marketer of the
that I wish I
year
could have brought with me.
Yeah.
It's easier to go the other way and say what was missing than what we had. But I think the strategy that we had then was much, I'm going to take a leap out here and say it was very people focused. And so we didn't have email and we didn't have a website and we didn't have LinkedIn. So when we wanted to keep in touch with a client, a center of influence, create a presence in a vertical market, we had to do that by being present in that market. We had to be there. We had to talk to those bankers in a meaningful way, talk to those attorneys in a way that assured them that we would be the greatest choice if they needed someone to refer someone for their client to have. And the clients to say that they had selected us because we were the best choice, the most obvious choice, the choice with the greatest resources, and that genuinely cared about them. And I think that genuineness comes when it's not an email campaign. It isn't a postcard campaign before COVID. It was just truly picking up the phone and saying, my father used to say, silence is deadly. Why haven't we heard from so-and-so in the last 3 months or whatever it might be? You don't just go year to year waiting for your tax return or an audit or quarterly for a financial statement. Why haven't we heard from them recently? When did we last see them? And we just kept after and kept on top of the needs and concerns of our client in a very personal way. And I think it's easier now. I cannot count. I'm so one of the worst people that propose this, but I perpetrate it. I'm a perpetrator. I text, Gene, how are you? I haven't talked to you in 3 months since pandemic started. Hey, Sarah, let's have lunch. We're both in crazy New Jersey or crazy New York. I don't pick up that phone the way I used to because I have other options now. But if they didn't exist, I would be talking to you. And if you've ever noticed when you have lunch with someone, the difference in the conversation and the threads that you can find to connect and have a more meaningful interaction with, that you don't do when you ask a question straight out in a text or an email or whatever, and they answer the question straight out. There's much less of a dialogue. And so I think that probably that's the one thing we did not bring forward with us that technology is allowed, and COVID has exacerbated because we aren't in front of each other as much, and all those wonderful tools are taking the place. Nothing wrong with Teams, nothing wrong with Zoom. I love doing this. I wouldn't see you otherwise. I'm not coming to sunny Florida. I would love to, but I'm not there yet. And so this is good enough, but it isn't the way we did it, and it wasn't an option, and we just stuck with everybody all the time.
Okay, so that there's another lesson here, and panelists, I'm interested in your feedback. Have we lost our, how to word this right? Have we lost our skills or desire to really communicate more directly with each other? Are we hiding behind email or texting as opposed to, should I say, call someone on the phone?
I'm a millennial. I never wanted you to call me, so I'm good.
Jean, are you talking about us and how we do our roles? Or are you talking about how we need to help drive and generate business for the practice?
That's a good distinction, but I was looking at it as, we have these other tools available to us. So are we being a bit lazy and hiding behind an email or a text as opposed to dialing a phone
I think
or instigating a virtual meeting,
I think we have a bad habit of multitasking. So I feel like the texting, the emailing, it feels like a way to get more done when it's often not. I don't know that it's necessarily hiding behind an easier way to communicate. I feel like it's a bad habit of trying to do too much at once.
That's a good point.
Personal.
Can I just
Right.
interject real quick? I love that Sarah said that. And again, I'm a perpetrator of the text, but I'm also a perpetrator of multitasking.
Oh.
And when I mentioned that we had interaction with our clients and friends and colleagues in the business community in person, I said it was genuine because there weren't as many distractions. If I was talking to you, I was talking to you. I wasn't talking to you and looking down in my lap and have you wonder, what am I staring at? Hello, and no surprise, I'm emailing someone. That email couldn't possibly be any more important than our conversation. It's a conversation and I will have it, but in due time. And I know myself, I tend to feel like, oh my God, I got all those emails cleared up. I might have just cut short the conversation a bit. I got the gist of what you said, but probably not every single word. You can't, the brain isn't made to be able to do two things at the same time equally as well. It can do two things, but something's got to give. So I'm a people person, and I miss that I do tend to take it the easier way, or I can say a quick hello to you and feel like I've touched you and impacted you, but I didn't have to call.
Right. So
See, this
Adrian,
might-
I'm sorry, let me just interrupt for a second and maybe you could weave this into your response. But looking at my original question a little differently. So again, you were Marketer of the Year in 1993. What marketing strategy or technology do you see these days that you wish you had in 1993?
A laptop. we didn't have laptops back then. I mean, come on. You had a desktop and that was about it. And if you wanted to lug it home, you'd have to bring a cart to be able to take it home with you. So, for me, it's a double-edged sword, but for me, it's clearly technology. I've been fortunate to have a global role now for probably the last 20 years of my career, and I couldn't even imagine doing the job without the type of technology that we have access to now that we didn't have, back in 1993. And, just for fun, and maybe this is probably for Sarah the most, but I just want to show something, to you all. I don't know if you guys even know what this is. Hello?
She's looking like, wait, what is this?
She's looking at it like,
I
what?
don't
What's
know.
That's right. That's right.
How do you text?
You couldn't leave a message.
Yeah, how do you text?
Exactly. You couldn't even leave a message.
There's
But
not
my
even
point-
any push buttons. You can't leave a message. You can't.
That's
push
right. That's a
buttons.
rotary dial. My reason for kind of bringing that up is that even today, right? I mean, EY is a $45 billion. We've got we've got 300,000 employees and so on and so forth. And still today, in my humble opinion, business is still conducted on a personal level, right? Clients hire firms, but they fire people. Or I should say it's the other way around. Clients hire people, but they fire firms. And and again, I bring that up because it still is, even today in the business that we are driving $45 billion of business every year, it comes down to having a relationship with someone. And it takes personal contact. And that personal contact isn't a text, in my opinion, a text or an email. It's still having a face-to-face dialogue, or even picking up the phone and having a conversation with that individual.
Right. That's awesome. Okay. So let's move on to a different question. And let me just again make a plug for the chat box. I see some comments in there, but I don't see any questions. So, what do you want to ask the panelists? What do you think about the conversation? So don't hesitate about using the chat. I promise that we'll get to it. So I'd like to hear from each of our panelists about what you feel is the best opportunity in the accounting marketing profession today. And Eric, let's start with you.
I think I have a couple comments on that. One of the things is I believe that the intersection of transformation or digital transformation with the customer experience is a huge opportunity for marketers to get involved in the delivery of services to the clients in a different way that's right now it's kind of shaping up before our eyes. It's like real time. But that's a great way it's a huge opportunity for marketers to get that leadership role that maybe they wouldn't have in a traditional marketing department, because they're helping the firm transform. They're helping the firm expand its brand and its influence to other areas of the country or even worldwide. So no longer do you have to have this physical footprint where you're just doing business in that market, but you can now attract clients virtually anywhere in the world. And so being on the front end of that is a huge opportunity for marketers to help guide their firms and get that up and running. I also think that, just the whole idea of the shift of the business model too is a big opportunity, helping firms navigate disruption, because we as marketers have a 360-degree view of the playing field, or we tend to have that other side of the brain that looks at things differently, asymmetrical thinking. And that's what we bring to the table, because there's typically not those voices in a room. I mean, you don't have those voices in the room unless you have somebody who just thinks differently about a situation. And so I believe we have that skill set to be able to do that. And there are more and more marketers, getting outside of their comfort zone, helping guide their firms. And Sarah had the great example of COVID. And she was on the leading edge of pushing her firm to do the things that they did successfully. I don't know that they could have done that without somebody like her in the room.
Yeah, agreed.
Can I
Agent, if I could just interrupt for 1 second, just to your point, Eric, and there are services that firms need to be providing and also need for themselves that partners may not believe they actually need. And you also need that voice too, to be willing to make that pitch and educate the partners in those areas. I would say, you talked about, changing your pricing model. Absolutely agree with that. It could also be, we're in merger mania. Are firms really concerned about the cultures that they're building with these combinations? They say they are, but are they really working at integrating those cultures? So I think that's equally important. It's not only the services that firms are providing to their clients, but services that the firms themselves need that marketers could play a role in.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. Adrian, I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to add something to what Eric said, and I'm just using myself as a case in point, because the last 5 years of my career with EY has been out of what was the classic marketing and business development, but my time has been spent in our global delivery services arm, which is about a 70,000 person group. And as the global growth leader, my role was charged in essentially how do we transform the way we deliver services to our clients. And that's where I've been spending the last 5 years of my time and my energy. And so it's taking all of those same skills and experiences that I gained in helping to drive new revenue and new business for our practitioners into something different, and taking it to maybe a new plane or a new level where how do we leverage people, process, and technology to actually improve the level of services that we deliver to our clients.
Okay, so this might not be a fair question, Adrian, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So given that response, what would be a first step for the marketers on this Zoom to take on a similar role within their firms? Is there a particular skill they need? What would you say a first step might be?
Know the fundamentals of the business. Know how the business actually works. Get in and understand the engagement, how the engagement process works, simple little things like how we bill our clients, break down the billing process, what makes up an hourly charge. Really just get in and understand how the business is run and how the business operates, because to me that was a fundamental component that I lacked during my former years. Unfortunately, was just through time and through experience got into that aspect of the business, and that led to, this global role that I'm in now. And to me, it's been probably one of the best steps in my career.
Right. Wonderful. Okay.
It's just driving transformation for the business itself and for the firm,
Right.
versus spending time trying to actually, get individual hours pushed through, through our normal marketing and business development
Right.
activities.
Okay. So Sarah, what do you think is the best opportunity for accounting marketing?
Personally, I loved Eric's answer. I don't want to repeat too much of it, but I would agree that there is a tremendous amount of opportunity for us to be leading the solutions that are coming along with the disruption that's happening. We often don't think that's our role, but it so is. It just so is. And that's where I feel like I get most excited. And I think that leveraging that uncertainty and finding solutions to be successful among that is probably, there are so many opportunities for accounting marketers to have a role in that, especially with those areas that I mentioned earlier. What's happening with all of the firms consolidating and private equity coming into the space, and shaking out clients that are unhappy from other firms or talent. There's a role for marketing in identifying opportunities in all of those areas. It's challenging, but it's also fun. And I feel like the marketing skills that are most valuable now for accounting marketers are evolving. And, we wouldn't have necessarily hired some of these specialized digital type marketers a few years ago. And now there are so many firms hiring these types of marketers in-house. And now we're able to work remotely and work from home, and we can work for firms all over the country. And I feel like between the skills that are needed, the wider net of firms and the ability to be able to work just about anywhere, that there are more opportunities than there ever have been. So I find all of that really pretty exciting.
Right. Wonderful. All right, Sally.
Several years ago, one of the AIM conferences, we had a panel of business owners who had newly left their existing firm and then went on to a different firm instead. And some were smaller, some were larger. One was a family business, I think. And the question asked, of course, is, why did you switch? Adrian pointed out, you leave a firm and it's how you're treated, right? And each person who told their story on the panel, while the stories were very different, all had the same response. And that is, they left the firm because they were treated like a client. They were not treated like they had been during the sales process when they were a prospect. And that lack of attention, that lack of genuine interest, that lack of concern. I think one of the roles we play becomes a little more obvious, even so, as we're separated more during COVID, is that role in culture. And if you're looking for a job, and apparently, of course, with the Great Resignation, everyone's moving around and shuffling here and there, one of the things that's attracted people to our firm, young people especially, is that there is a marketing culture. There's an affection for business development and marketing. We're embedded in the leadership process, and it says something to the community about the firm and the kind of atmosphere we have. And it makes someone want to be at our firm, want to be where there's vertical markets and experts in nonprofit and experts in employee benefit, and that we're disciplined and structured about it. We always had that. We had partners who understood nonprofits better than other partners. And maybe we had 30, 40 clients, and maybe it would have grown to 100 without me. But instead, it's at whatever, 350 or 400 or 450, because we approached it seriously and like a business proposition and disciplined in every way. And so I think that sends a message to staff as well as to clients and centers of influence that this is the kind of firm that cares about people, cares about its culture, and is always looking for ways to create those connections. And I think marketers add to that. When a partner's busy serving their client in a unique way, we fill in some of those blanks, serving them in the human space that they might get missed when they're busy serving in the technology space or the technical space. I'm not going to do an audit, but I certainly do help a client go through what their website should look like if something's missing. So
Right.
It's added value.
Right, absolutely. Okay. Great answers. Of course, this means like really there's just so much opportunity here, and we could see how marketers are taking on bigger roles. Marketing departments are expanding, firms are hiring specialists. I mean, these are big differences, than 40 years ago then, or 30 years ago, when what was the average tenure of a marketing director was, 8 months or 9 months, whatever
exactly.
it was. I won't bore you with my own story, but holy moly. Yeah, I proved them wrong and left 3 months earlier than they thought. Okay. Yeah. Oh, gosh, a million stories. So back in the late 80s, so, my age is transparent by this point, right? I was getting my MBA at Hofstra, and I was writing my thesis about accounting marketing, right? Can you imagine the excitement? That was riveting to my marketing professor and my mentor. And we conducted this is when I lived on Long Island, and we did a survey of, practitioners and asked them about marketing and business development. And the responses that we got, when you look back on it, were absolutely incredible. They thought marketing was unprofessional. It wasn't needed. It wasn't necessary to grow our firms. Like they just had their blinders on to, what marketing and business development, could be. And we've seen how accounting, marketing, and business development has changed over the years, how it has advanced. We have greater tools, we have more technology. I'd like to say there's a better understanding in the industry about the role of marketing and business development. But given all of that, do you think that marketing and business development has harmed the profession? And if so, how has it harmed the profession? Who would like to take that on first? Adrian.
Sure. It's a very complex question, and I know we need to be brief here. So I'll start off by saying no. Okay. That no has a caveat. I don't believe that that accounting and marketing and business development has hurt the profession. In fact, I think it's the other way around. I really do think that it's helped the profession come out into the light for what it really is, and that is a business like most other businesses. The however part, though, comes with a lot of what's happening at the global level around governance and regulatory issues and things like that. We're seeing more and more of that globally, and I think it's eventually going to bleed into the US as well, where the profession, the original hardcore auditing piece of it, will have a difficult time surviving because of some of the regulatory requirements that are starting to come into play. And I do believe that the business will split at some point in the distant future, where you'll have a separate carved out entity that is the auditing practice, and the rest of the firm will be a separate legal entity, operating under its own governance structure, probably still connected, but operating under its own governance structure. And I kind of bring that into focus to say that because of that, I think marketing and business development will become even more critical than less critical as a result of sort of the, how the business is going to be transforming and evolving. And I think we're going to need that even more. In fact, even within the assurance side of it, or the auditing side of it, you're probably going to have a split between the business where there'll be a marketing business development component that deals with the client-facing component, and you'll have the regulatory component, which are the hardcore auditors that are actually doing the audit work. So I guess it's a long-winded answer to say yes. I think it's been very critical, and I think it will be even more so critical as we go forward.
Right, and isn't it, if I'm not mistaken, it is EY in the news now about making that split?
I have no comment.
Thank you, Adrian.
Yes.
Okay, so Sally, has marketing and business development harmed the profession?
So I would say emphatically no, and I would have used the same word as Adrian, and I don't want to be redundant, but it's a business. Mm-hmm. And so businesses need HR. It's like saying, is their HR director harmful when she does such an important impact on our people and our culture and our training in a variety of different ways. Technology the same. Anyone who's not a CPA, right? But at the same time, my experience is all in smaller firms. So the firms I'm in are 200 people or less, and they're very much client facing. And I think the only challenge I have in the years that I've been in this business, and it's not unique to Sobel Co. at all. In fact, Sobel is one of the firms that does a really good job of interacting, but often I become an enabler. I am the one in the community. I don't have clients to serve. I'm not tied up during tax season or audit season or in June, July, and August doing nonprofit audits. And so I have the freedom. My job description is to be present, and to be present on behalf of Sobel Co., not on behalf of myself. So there's a purpose, and I do that well. But at the same time, it lets other partners who might be really great at engaging with clients and others in the community, it enables them not to have to, well, I'm busy today, or I can't, or I thought I could, or whatever the excuse may be. And again, it's not necessarily this firm, but it's all of the smaller firms. When there's a professional marketing director, business developer in place, becomes sort of easy to step back and say, well, you're going, or you go do it, or relying on me to say, you need to be at this, and here's who you need to meet, and have it's just sometimes takes a little of the impetus away, that you become more of a catalyst, and it makes it a little harder for those partners to be at the forefront of forging their own relationships. My partners are really great at having wonderful connections. But in the smaller firms, that is usually what happens, right? It's like I said, 200 people or less. And so they're very much involved and integrated into the community. But if you say how many of us sit on boards, there is no question that I sit on more boards than all the others, right? It's just because I have time, because it's not part of my job description, because it's what I love to do. So I just want to make sure that while I'm doing that, I'm not myself unintentionally creating a harmful situation where other people stop taking ownership because it's handed off to the marketing director or to the business development or the champion of the niche. Bridget knows all the nonprofits. Maybe the rest of the team doesn't, because they just follow right in Bridget's wake. She's the champion, the cheerleader for the nonprofit team. So you just like to make sure that's spread around a little bit. But the act itself of marketing in a disciplined way and being engaged in the community, I just think could never be bad. That's just my opinion.
Okay. So Eric or Sarah, do either of you feel that marketing and business development has harmed the profession?
Yeah, I remember laughing to myself as I was preparing for this panel and seeing this question. I'm like, where the heck is she going? I was almost offended that this question was even on there, Jean. No, I don't.
And you showed up anyway.
I still came. I'm like, let me give her the benefit of the doubt. That was just
Thanks.
Yeah, no, it's always been critical. It has always been critical. I think that we're exposing just how critical it is, that there are certain circumstances in our environment, in our industry right now, that are making it harder and harder to survive without obviously making marketing and BD a priority. I believe that firms that are experiencing any turbulence related to marketing and BD, it is not necessarily the marketing and BD causing issues, it's resistance to change, which is always going to be a problem with some, it's easier to have a marketing strategy than it is to overcome that resistance to change. And I think that is happening everywhere in our profession, and not just in marketing and BD. So the firms that have that appetite for risk or can overcome change and look to the future and try new things, they'll be fine with marketing and BD. It's that mindset that's even more important. I just feel like it's more competitive than ever. And even if your firm's goal isn't necessarily to grow by 20% organically, even just to survive, even just to maintain, you're going to have to make marketing and BD a priority. So is that harmful? No, but is it a fact? Yeah, and then that's really just how I feel about that, Jean.
Right. Eric, anything to add to that?
I don't think it's harmful because marketing drives value and marketing drives innovation. And those two things now have to become the cornerstone of our profession. Trust is always, has always been known as the cornerstone, and that's still important. But as a profession, in order to survive and remain relevant, we have to drive value. And that's just a good thing. That marketing is the tip of the spear on that.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so let me ask you one more question before we get to the chat box. And thank you for those who entered questions. And don't hesitate. We've got about 13 minutes. So we've talked a lot about all of these changes and how marketing and business development has evolved, and the opportunities that exist there, and the tools and strategies that we have. We've spent the past hour talking about all these fantastic things. But we, at the same time, I think all of us would agree that there are challenges that still exist within accounting marketing. So let me ask it, I could ask this in a more positive way. So initially I worded this as, what's your biggest frustration? But instead of what's your biggest frustration, let's call it, what's the biggest opportunity for change? Something that needs to be changed within accounting marketing that the marketers here can help implement or execute. And Eric, I'll go to you because your volume's already, your mic is already on.
I mean, I think it's surrounding talent. And, when I came into the profession 20 years ago, there was certainly not as big of a talent crunch as there is now. And it seems like every year there's less and less people, there's more and more work to be done and less people to actually do the work. So I think the big opportunity for marketers is to try to ask a different question about talent. And it can't just be the same thing, we're going to recruit on campus. We have to ask a different question and solve a different problem to figure out how to make firms scale and grow despite the obvious limitations of the talent crunch and the trend that's out there. And that could be, again, it could be innovation, it could be transformation. But I think that's our biggest opportunity, is to help firms solve this problem. And some firms are doing a good job. And whether that's outsourcing or developing a new mousetrap or onboarding new technology or delivering, transforming service delivery, that's our biggest opportunity for sure.
Mm-hmm. Okay, awesome.
Gene, I'll make it easy for me. I would reiterate exactly what Eric said, 100%.
Mm-hmm. Okay, awesome. Yeah.
Talent,
Adrian, I know you've been on my other Capstone Connects, and it's, we've talked about the people issue. So yeah, it's there and it's real, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sarah.
Yeah, mine's a variation of the same answer as well. Personally, I often tend to overwhelm myself seeing how many different solutions there are, how many different technologies there are, how many different combinations of the same matrix you can put together, and so prioritizing projects, prioritizing resources, making sense of what platforms to use, what technologies to use, what combination of skills to employ on the marketing team, finding that right formula on the Rubik's Cube is and that never stops either. But there's obviously an opportunity there to get the right formula, but that's consistently changing, always evolving. So finding that right formula.
Right. Okay, wonderful. Sally.
Obviously, we have agreed we're not going to just repeat each other's words over and over, and it's always going to be people. But as well as internally and culture building and nurturing, it's also external. We're hearing so many people now saying, I'm the chief experience officer or the chief client experience. And I feel that those firms are taking a stand and saying, look, we know we're a relationship business, and we know that we may not always have the time to devote to probing, listening, understanding what.
Oop, I think we've lost Sally there for a minute. Sally, are you back?
Did I freeze?
Yes, you did, just for a second.
I was just saying that managing the experiences that our clients have with us, so they know that we are essential to their growth, that we care about them, understand their industry, talk their language, and put them first. And I think that's a role that we can play as well, even if it's just to urge our own partners to assume those. Every person in the firm should be the chief experience officer. And how do I make that happen?
Okay, awesome. All right. Okay, so guys, I'm sorry, go ahead, Adrian.
So if I can add to what Sally said as well, I agree wholeheartedly with what Sally said. I think sort of the chief client experience officer is the new frontier. It's the next frontier for many of the marketers and business development folks here.
Mm-hmm.
Wrap your arms around trying to understand what that really means.
And we've had
bring that to your organization.
Yeah, and we've had some colleagues, make that switch, right? And some for, years ago. So yeah, that seems crystal clear now as an opportunity, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so Sarah, the Witham dance videos, were they helpful in recruitment? Yeah.
Yeah, they were. Yeah, they were. That was one of the dots we were able to connect most, right away. And to Sally's point, it was because it was fun, but it even was more so because it created a culture that people, right? The perception of a culture that people wanted to be part of. And I should clarify, it didn't create the perception of a culture. It showed people the culture that we had, which was very, very genuine, very authentic to Witham at the time. So it was just a way that we were able to show people what it's like to work for an accounting firm, right? It's maybe not what you would expect it to be, and you can have a ton of fun, and it was very authentic to Witham at the time. So I saw the beginning part of Lynn's, hey Lynn, the beginning part of Lynn's question about being involved more so with HR, and that's certainly something that we're experiencing. I think HR and marketing have never worked closer than we do now at Grassi. We're always trying to showcase, again, our culture, our values. We're finding not just in talent acquisition, but obviously in the way that our clients are choosing us as well. If they don't feel like their values align with ours, they're making other choices. It's their, we're seeing, and they're giving that answer right away. And they're letting us know, we felt we aligned with XYZ a little bit more closely. And maybe we did feel that way, but we're not putting it out into the universe as clearly as some other firms might have been a few months ago. So there's so much that we're doing together in terms of recruitment, or we're certainly getting involved with ESG now. We're working closely with HR on certain projects like that. Yeah, more and more than ever before.
Right. Sally or Eric, working with HR? And if so, what have you guys been up to related to marketing and recruiting and HR?
One of the things that we have grabbed onto as well as everyone else is DE&I, internal newsletters, committees. We have formed committees so that, especially because of COVID, people not bumping into each other casually and informally in the office, we have to force that interaction. And so we set up 7 or 8 committees. Each one we have a committee for working parents. We have a committee for diversity. We have a variety of places people can move between them as well as beyond them. And they have meaningful activities, meaningful conversations, lead the firm in terms of discussion on particular topics, and really contribute to the way we're thinking and opening us up to thinking in a different way. And you need to work really hard at that when you're not all sitting in the office. And our office is remote if you want it to be, come in on a hybrid platform if you want to, come in all the time if you want to, do what you want. So the majority of people are home or on hybrid, as you might expect. So we're not having the chance to interact as we would. And so these committees have made a difference for us, and marketing has taken the lead and helped promote that and write the articles and drive some of that.
Right. Mm-hmm. I always thought there were significant parallels between marketing and HR, in that HR is really focused on the employee experience and the employee life cycle, from onboarding a new employee, and we do the same thing with clients, right? We want to understand those client journeys and we map it out. So marketers have been doing that for years. Internal HR folks are doing the same thing. So I really think that we can complement each other nicely on that employee experience part of it, culture versus brand, like what's the difference? So our jobs are similar in a sense. If you throw out the compliance part of HR, and I'm not talking about HR being the police of the firm, I'm really talking about them helping to develop and define the culture, helping map out, career paths for employees. And so I always enjoy working with our HR team on these types of projects because it's familiar to me and it's familiar to marketers.
Yeah. And, if I could kind of sum up that point, in my unscientific research of, online networking and talking with marketers, I am surprised about the number of marketers who do not collaborate with HR within their firms, that they're operating separately. And I think panelists, you would agree, that's a big lost opportunity, based upon everything that we've been talking about today. So that could be an action item for sure as follow-up from today. Awesome. Okay. So we are just about there at 2:15 Eastern. As at the beginning, I said I was really excited about this session, and I still am. It would not be possible without our panelists. So if you guys want to take your video, put it on, or your mic on, or use emojis. Let's give our panelists a hand, right? So we've got Adrian Ornick, Sally Glick, Eric Majchrzak, Sarah Cirelli. You guys were awesome. I hope this is the first of many programs that we could set up like this to talk about where we are as a profession and where we're moving forward. So if there are no other questions, I don't see any in the chat. I want to wish everybody a great rest of the day. Panelists, thanks again. Thanks everybody for joining in today. And until next time, be well.
Thanks, Jean.
Great.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everybody.
everybody.
Thanks for having me.
Sure,
Thank you.
guys.